Hi, everybody.
Everybody, I see Teo coming up.
Yes, I see him too. Maybe I didn't have.
There he is.
Hey, how's it going? Okay,
Hey.
before we continue on, is it Teo or how do you pronounce your name?
Tayo.
Tayo.
We should have done bets. Us ladies should have done bets.
What?
I asked the other panelists, I said, is it Teo or is it
I thought.
something else? But so thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I'm from Nigeria, so it's a Nigerian name.
Kyle. Lovely.
Beautiful. All right, and just letting in all our participants. Welcome, everybody. I think I have everybody in here so far. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to mute everybody out. This will be an open conversation, but we just want to start the panel a little bit with a bit of an agenda and set the intention and the goal for the conversation, and then we'll absolutely open it up. Can't wait to hear from everybody. So let's start with that. Toby, you want? Okay. I will start us off. I'm Natalie. Hi, everybody. And we have our beautiful panel of guest speakers today, including Toby, our co-host, Carla Smith, Haley, and Tayo. I said it right. Awesome. Okay. So thank you so much for joining us today. Really the intention of this conversation, when Toby and I were talking about it, is to create a safe, welcoming space where we can have really uncomfortable conversations, because uncomfortable conversations are the best way for us to grow and expand and evolve. So having said that, Toby, I know you wanted to start with a bit of a prayer or something to help us just get into a deeper intention. So did you want to start?
Yes, good morning, everybody. I just want to thank you guys for joining us today. And I see a lot of people that I know personally. Thank you so much for coming out to support. I just want to set this off on a good vibration, good energy. So I know not everybody might believe in the same faith, but we're all here for the same reason. So, and that's to be together and bring unity and all of that stuff. So, I just want to thank you, Lord, for bringing us together in this moment, in this time. I really feel like it's significant. There's no accident here of why we all have come together. I just ask all of us to be open-minded, to be positive, to be unafraid, to be fearless during this time that we have together. Let us be brave and let us walk away from this situation knowing that we have more information, more tools to go out into the world and impact it in a positive way. So I just ask you to be with us during this time. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Toby. Thank you. I'm personally not that much of a religious person, but I still see the beauty in us taking a spiritual moment to unite and be together. So thank you for that. All right. So why are we here?
Hello.
Hi. Let's start us off with Toby and I have a whole bunch of stuff that we could talk about. I'm sure we will probably only get to a couple of them, but really this conversation started off with I had listened to an interview between Gabby Bernstein and Kay Ritchie. Has anyone else heard that interview at all between the two of them? It was really an inspirational conversation. And one of the things that Gabby had said a little bit earlier, she had said that she was really ashamed of what her people had done. And for a moment, it kind of set me back for a moment. I was kind of like, shame, like why would she be ashamed? Why should I be ashamed? I didn't do anything. I have, the whole conversation of I have Black friends and I've never been racist. I've never done anything overtly racist. And then it kind of came to this conversation of really understanding the oneness of humanity in my mind, and how we collectively can create a better world. And that's definitely what Kay Ritchie also says. She wants to create a society out of love that is just for everyone involved. And that's the beauty of having this conversation. Does anybody have anything that they want to add to that, and how they felt if they've heard those words? Carla, Haley?
So I mean, I just know I've been so drawn to be part of creating opportunities for people to just explore all of the aspects of how to make change happen, right? So we have to do some internal work, we have to collectively do work. And I haven't heard that interview, but I know that just being so conscious of the energy that so many people have brought to the conversation. So many leaders who have been doing this work for decades, right? And I look to them as my lead, like the people who I'm looking to. I think we all are teachers and students at this point, right? We're all just, I am looking to some people to lead me, and I'm so grateful that people are looking to me to lead them. And I think I love and interested in making change. Yeah. Oh, my internet. Sorry.
Yeah. Can you just repeat? I didn't hear that last little
Sorry,
bit.
I'm just encouraged that so many people are looking to make change. Yeah.
Yeah. Ayo, what was that? Tell me.
I definitely echo Carla's sentiments. And I guess the one thing that I do want to add to this conversation is that I do think for many people, this is the first time the fullness of one's emotion has been, okay to feel. I know for me in particular, one of the things that I had always been mindful of was my anger. And in this last month, I think it's been safe enough for me to express that without worrying about the consequences of what anyone else would feel. And so, I can understand how maybe someone that has not lived a certain reality might react to that, because, to that person, maybe we live in the same world. I have this, it's never happened. But I do think we are at a turning point where many people are now able to listen. I mean, the confluence of events with COVID, with the health crisis, with the financial crisis, with the civil rights movement is causing people to be reflective anyway. And so when you add this layer of what's going on, I think it's a moment for people to learn, unlearn, and relearn. But I also think it's a moment for people to understand that there are a lot of pent up emotions, a lot of triggering events. And as anyone would like, if you're triggered and you have pent up emotions, you would like that freedom to be able to express that without, some sort of alienation. So I do think we're at a reckoning. My big thing and my big focus, though, is making sure this moment is a sustainable movement. And so in order for that to happen, in my opinion, I believe everybody has a role. And there's been a lot of listening now, but I think people have to get out of the individual frame of reference of themselves as not good people, or good people rather, and understand that there's a bad system. And so if the focus becomes how do I dismantle this bad system as opposed to be how do I prove I'm a good person, I think we have a better way of sustaining this. And so that's kind of where my focus is. I think we've been listening a lot, and a lot of things are pointing out to the systemic things. So let's play our parts in the systemic systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Some of the stuff that you had just said, the anger, and Tovi, you and I had conversations about the stereotype angry Black woman, you can even say, because that's the conversation you and I had. And this entire idea of systematic generational trauma that is finally being, you know, as you put, Tayo, okay to release, quote unquote, okay to release. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? You know, anyone want to share on that?
I think for me, yeah, we did have this conversation in regards to a couple things, and the fact that, you know, even for like my tone of voice that I speak in, two things. A lot of people, when they hear me speak, they actually, if they don't know my name, think that I am Caucasian, because for them, in their mind, I speak proper. And I'm not too sure what that means, but I'm just like, but then when they hear my name, then it kind of clicks to them that I'm probably more of another race, and that's fine. But then that's the other thing too, even with the tone of my voice, some people think that I'm always talking in an aggression, but this is just really how I speak. So then now when they see me, when I'm talking and I'm passionate about what I'm talking, they see it as being aggressive. And, you know, I have an attitude and all of that other stuff. So it's like, you know, as Tayo's saying, is like, now I feel like finally people are understanding when I say certain things about things that upset me or I find them offensive. They're like, yeah, I kind of get it now. You know, you're not coming from that place. But to me, this is part of the problem of where we are right now, is that everybody's been afraid to speak. Whether it doesn't, then that doesn't even have to do with race, because everybody's in a sensitive mode. And I think they were in a sensitive mode even before COVID. You know, everybody's so sensitive about, you know, it's like you can't tell jokes anymore. And you know, and it's, if you're going to be that sensitive, we have a problem, because you have to have grit right now. You have to have a backbone, and you have to come from a place of fearlessness if we're really, really going to come together.
Mm-hmm. And I think we really have to have the courage to have really uncomfortable conversations with each other, and like Toby's saying, like, let go of our defensiveness, because that's just sort of been what we've operated from for such a long time. You know, as a Black woman, I always kept a little bit quieter, or I was sort of groomed to be polite when things are not okay. And, you know, as obviously as I've gotten older, that has been less and less okay. But it's part of how life was when you were little. You knew to just sort of be quiet, because if you speak out too much, really horrible things can happen, right? So, you know, I've been talking a lot about I have 3 boys, and just raising them and having to teach them sort of this language around how to behave in certain situations, so that they aren't hurt, right? And so it's a very different situation than, you know, just learning how to be polite, or just learning, just what feels like should be normal anyway. And I just think we have to start talking about race as any other conversation, right? I think we've been so conditioned not to talk about race, because obviously that helps keep privilege and supremacy at its operation working, right? So we need to just change that really, sort of drastically and quickly, I think.
Yeah, and to recognize the differences between cultures is something to be recognized.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know, is for me personally, and I actually feel more comfortable saying, okay, you're Black, and it's okay. But whereas before, I was kind of like, we don't see that word. It's not nice.
Well, can I ask that question? I'm very curious about that. Well, I'm always curious. Why did you not feel comfortable saying Black before?
Yeah, because I don't know, maybe because it's ingrained in racism in a way that doesn't allow for someone to be, it's that mentality of we're all the same, we all have, where's the commonalities? Have that, if you can identify the commonalities, then you can get along. So you don't want to highlight the differences necessarily in a way that will separate you from that's what my thought process had been.
Same with me too. It was like, you know, this whole, everything has brought to light to me how much, and I'm all about taking ownership of all the things that we're learning and the next level of our evolution. But it was like, I thought that not recognizing color was treating everything equal. And in reality, it was like, no, that's not the case at all. That's actually feeding into the whole concept that we're not seeing the inequality. We're not seeing what's actually going on. So it was eye-opening to me to be like, wow, wait a minute. And that's just what I feel like I've been trying to do with my community and with the people that are in my world. Is like, it's not you're racist or you're not racist, or you're a good person or you're a bad person. Like I think this is the time to actually peel back all of those labels that we put on ourselves and say, okay, wait a minute, there's so much that can be passed down from our environment, generationally. I mean, I believe energetically in our beings it can be passed down. So there's all these subconscious, conscious things that we're carrying. And I think now is the time to go, hey, like, let's all just accept that we are evolving and that it's a great time to kind of look back at everything with a fresh perspective.
So it's interesting that I'm glad both of you talked about that, Haley and Natalie. I grew up as the son of a diplomat, and I'm from Nigeria. And you know, Nigeria has over 250 ethnic groups. And then I grew up in 5 countries, 4 continents. So I was always surrounded by differences. So whether I wanted to or not, I didn't necessarily have a choice. I was never the black enough guy or the Nigerian enough guy or the something enough or whatever, or I sounded different. And so I remember initially hearing stuff like that. When I would hear things, it's like, I don't see all that. And I was like, but that's the word. Like, I don't.
That's the word.
Yeah. So in my head, this has been since I was a kid. So that's how I was. And so I did a talk called The Art of Diplomacy, where I was breaking down my dad's job and what I learned from diplomacy. And I think it all boils down to being able to understand the differences around you and finding the commonality, the commonalities that exist within them. So if you're looking for progress, at least in my opinion, you first have to be able to see, understand, and through the seeing and understand, you're able to see how the same set of rules affect different people, right? And then you can also use the commonality that would be we're all humans and we're all this. And so if we want our humanities to be felt, and that's the common thing that we have, we want to protect, we want to be seen, heard, and understood for who we really are. Using that knowledge of the difference should be the primer for helping people to say, okay, you want to feel like you can be yourself, so let's get that there. I think that's the common thing we all want. And so that's the shift that I've been trying to help to share, I guess. I don't know if it's relevant or if it's applicable, but that's what I think needs to happen. And I also agree with the sentiment of sitting with discomfort. I think that's the biggest thing that anyone going through this has to understand. It's not a culture that we're accustomed to. We're not accustomed to making mistakes. We're not accustomed to highlighting things where we are uncertain. You know, perfectionism is this thing that is put up there on the mantle, and anyone else that falls short is sort of seen as less than usually. Yeah. And so I think we need to get that's another thing we need to understand, that this isn't like racism is going to end when we do this. This is a lifelong journey. So it's not a destination thing. It's just a series of things that will happen. So,
yeah. And to add on that, I also feel like we're not really, we're not equipped as in our society to dismantle as much as we are to build. And so dismantling feels kind of awkward for us. Like as if we're destroying, which we need to, but it doesn't feel like positive, right? Even though it's going to have a great outcome when we dismantle. So just adding on to that, I think that's another key piece.
That remind me of the statues thrown or taken down. Sorry, yes, there's someone who has a question. Please. Hey,
Xanthi, yeah, Xanthi, go ahead. I see your hand is raised, so go ahead.
I just wanted to talk about, not wanting to use the word Black, going back to that. When my kids were little and they were talking about their friends at school, and the school they went to and they still go to is very racially diverse. We'd always ask, if we didn't know who they were talking about, they'd be like, oh, he has glasses and short spiky black hair, and, go through the whole descriptor. And then finally it's like, okay, basically the idea was that we didn't want them to go immediately to the color of the person's skin, to their ethnicity. Talk about who they are as a person before you say, oh, he's the Asian kid, or he's the brown kid, or he's the black kid. It's like, talk about who they are as a person before you go. And sometimes, if they're like, if it's a group of friends and there's one brown kid, it's like, okay, it's easier to say he's the brown one, but it's not necessarily seeing their humanity first. And that's what we were always trying to teach. See who they are as a person before you go to the color of their skin. That's not it's not necessarily the most important part of who they are. It's just another part of who they are.
Interesting.
And, I don't know if in this conversation that's valid anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Masesha, I see that you had your hand up. This is my daughter. If you cannot see the relation already, but go ahead, love bug.
I think I just wanted to add that it's very, I think, foreign, because when we start highlighting the differences that we have between each other, that really goes against like our human nature to want to seek that are different in a sense, but it's also so important to highlight those differences, especially, and to acknowledge that people are Black or people are Asian, because being Black personally for me, being Black, that's something that impacts my lived experience every single day. So when people, like, for example, I'm in an interracial relationship and my boyfriend is white, and sometimes it can be very difficult because he doesn't understand. He's like, I just see us like as being equal, but I'm like, I know and I love that you think and believe that we're equal and you view us as that, but I'm like, the world doesn't view us as that. And that's a very important thing that we need to highlight, to understand in which the ways the system is working to discriminate against me and to oppress me. And that's the only way we can make this change, is acknowledging the ways in which the system is exacerbating these differences and leaving us disadvantaged.
Beautiful.
Back to dismantling the system, right?
Yeah. I mean, and I wanted to make sure that was it Shanti?
Xanthi.
And Acacia.
Acacia.
Can I get off the?
No, it's totally fine. Everybody says the same thing, so no problem.
I'm sorry for butchering Acacia, and both of you. Yes, I think you brought up great points. And one of the things that you were saying, Xanthi, was about teaching your kids to see deeper. I think that's what you were trying to say. And the interesting thing, as Acacia said, is it all comes down to your lived experiences and your exposure, right? The idea that you can see someone for who they really are, unfortunately, isn't what happens if you go up to an institution level. I've personally remember being turned down for jobs because of how my name sounded. Tayo is short for I can Tayo, and then I would meet some of the people afterwards, and they would hear me talk, and then it'd be a very big surprise to them because they made the assumption that I couldn't speak English, that's even based on multiple levels of that. Or I remember going to an apartment in New York City where I live here on the first day, and someone hiding their kid from me in the elevator or slamming the door in front of my face because I was in a gym attire, which is why the Ahmaud Arbery case is really triggering for me, you know, exercising or different things like that. So those type of things, unfortunately, just happen in many. I've been in dinners where people, formal dinners, where people would make jokes that they think are connecting, right? But they're very objectifying in terms of where I come from. And so until we can get to that level where the systems that we have in place are able to see people like you're saying, Zanti, for who they are, it's going to be very difficult not to start from that point of view, because once you start training yourself to recognize difference, you're going to be able to know how to stop it when you see it. A lot of times it's something that I feel, something that, you know, Seisha might feel, but if you see it and you are able to recognize it, you say, no, don't do that. Stop. That's bad. This is bad. That's from bias. And that's the ultimate goal of understanding why it's important to see color. It's understanding how you can use your privilege and access to stop that behavior, because it continuously does happen, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I will say my kids are 16 and 20 now, and when they're looking at, you know, their social group and their peers, they definitely look to the person. You know, their basis of judgment is, are you a jerk? If you're not a jerk, let's hang out. It's all cool. And that's basically their number one
Criteria?
Criteria for having friends.
Mhm.
But as they're older, they do seem to be very, let's say, politically active. My older son is going to vote for Biden because he was born when we were living in the States. They're very, very aware of the injustices that go with the different skin colors. So I think that in their personal life, I think they've adjusted well and adapted to what we've been teaching them. You know, like, see humanity first as a little kid, but then as you get older and become more aware of what's happening in the world, you view it with a different lens.
Yeah, Carla, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, I saw this great statement made that said, my blackness is essential. Like, it's an essential part of me. And I really think that's a key piece to raising kids, is Toby's daughter, Asasia, sorry. Asasia, that's a beautiful name. As Asasia said, it's a lived experience. And that's so important that we share that as well, right? It's like, it's such a huge, you know, I have 7 kids, step and biological, and we are a blended family of a lot of things, including race. And I think it's so impactful for us all to bring all of that to the table every single day in our everyday lived experience. My husband is white, I'm biracial, my kids have a black dad, my biological kids have a black dad. We have a lot of richness to bring to each other's lived experience. And so I think it's really important, you know, for us to be sharing that as equally as I wear glasses or contacts right now, or have brown hair or whatever. I think it's equally as powerful, right?
Yeah.
I understand your point for sure, but I just think now this is like the new conversation is bring that to the table, because it's rich and full and beautiful, right?
I agree with you, Carl.
Thank you.
And I think based on what you're talking about as well, because I'm personally born in Toronto, which is, you know, where it's always been kind of a racially diverse place. Not to say everybody's been accepting, but it's been a racially diverse place. But I lived in Edmonton for the majority of my life. And my daughter was born here as well. And it's very interesting, even for her, I remember when we moved to Toronto, her whole demeanor really changed when she realized that there was other people that looked like her. Because up until that time, if you would even imagine her being in school in like, 2000, 2001, and still really being the only Black child in a class. It's like surreal, because I'm thinking to myself, that was like me in the 80s, right? That's like how many years later? No, not even years, like literally decades later, and it's the same thing. I think one of the beautiful things is that, like Carla, my family's very diverse as well in race. You know what I mean? Me and my brothers, we have the same dad who is Black and their mother's white. I've dated outside of my race, whatever the case may be. But for my daughter, I always have taught her, one of the rules is like, family is not always blood. And I think we need to instill these type of mindsets, these type of language to our children, because that's where it starts. And I think because I've embedded that into my daughter, that family is not always blood. She has one Black godmother, one white godmother. Like, she has other people that she calls aunties. It's like the United Colors of Benetton. Let me age myself a little bit. You know what I mean? But that's what it is.
I'm with you, Toby, on that.
You know what I mean? And I love it. You know what I mean? But I think we have to instill that in our children. So, because if we don't instill that from young, then that's where we're failing. We are their main source of information for the longest time before they especially get into school. We need to make sure that we're educating them, informing them before other people can get into their ear, get into their mind. Strengthen them first so they understand that, you know what, I can say that's wrong, and they're not going to be scared or feel like they're going to be shamed or judged for it. Seisha, I see you have your hand up again.
I just wanted to add, because obviously you're talking about me, so I just wanted to add my own personal experience. Yes, growing up in Edmonton was very difficult. I think I was one of like higher elementary school. My entire elementary school was grade 1 to 6, so that's really tough. And especially, I didn't think I realized the impact it was having on me until I moved to Ontario. Like, when I was in Edmonton, I feel like I had a lot of like dysmorphia with my own race, because I was like, I really want like straight long hair, just like white girls have. I felt like all the guys preferably liked white girls and all this stuff. But then when I moved here, I didn't notice all those things. But then when I moved here and people would make certain comments, like even in university, people would be like, this one guy was sitting in front of me in a lecture hall and I was speaking about something, and he's like, honestly, he's like, I hope this doesn't sound bad, but like, I really thought you were white and like you speak really elegantly. And I was kind of just like, what is that supposed to mean? Like, that's really weird. Like, I didn't know how to respond, but I was able to really pick up on ways in which I felt like people were being subtly racist and their microaggressions and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Stacey, you're on. Okay, did you want to say something, Stacey, or are you just I'm just gonna mute her while she's ready to talk.
I just had a question for Tayo, because as I mentioned, my brothers are mixed, and this could be a good question for Carla too, raising 7 kids. God bless your heart. You're a champion. You are a champion. Oh. So, my brothers are mixed, and as I said, Edmonton has always been an interesting place in regards to, equality and me feeling equal. And this is my story. It might not everybody's experience, but I've realized, and I always embed in my brothers, that at the end of the day, when police pull them over, they are Black. So I find it challenging in the fact of, me being, I am the older sister, but I am also a Black woman, where sometimes I can come off aggressive in the fact that, like, but I also just want them to be safe. How do you feel like to have these conversations with young Black men to really make them understand, like, because I really find, especially in the younger generation, where they think like they're invincible, like nothing can ever happen to them. How do we get that message out that, you know what, like this is real life? Like you don't want these things to happen, but how can we prepare them?
Wow, that's a loaded question. So I'll come at it from a multiple angles. I'm the oldest of three men. So I have two younger Black brothers. I have, my parents are in Nigeria. They have their worries as well. I remember when I came to when I came to America when I was 17 for school, they had their perception of Black America as well as Nigerian identity, and so I remember just being told a lot of this. You're the parent now. You're this. Don't fall into this. Don't get into this, because if you get there, you would be seen as a gang, and if you're in a gang, get arrested and all those things. And so what I took from all those, the information overload, once I got dumped in Virginia, was it has to be a constant thing. So every time my mom, as annoying as it used to be, my mom will be talking about something going on, and she'll be like, "Oh, did you come home at 11:30 or something like that?" And I think it's about having the conversation, talking about your experience, sharing the lived experiences of people and finding moments to bond in a way where you incorporate it into your daily life. So, for example, I have a kid that I mentor, Victor Suarez. So he's half Puerto Rican, but he lives in a Black neighborhood. And when we have our weekly calls, because of COVID now, he does the thing. He's 13. I know. But I always say, hey, we've talked about everything, we've caught up, but now let's talk about this thing that you don't like to talk about all the time. So if you can promise me 10 minutes every time, I will give you whatever you want to talk about. We'll talk about Fortnite, we'll talk about every of those things. So I found that, making it clear to them that every time we talk, we'll do something of what you want, but something of what I want as well, is effective. And I also find that the things that my parents thought I wasn't listening to, I was actually listening to. And so even if you repeat it multiple times, I will occasionally tell my mom, "Hey, I remember when you told me this." And she'll be like, "Huh? I thought you didn't listen." And so it's just a matter of doing that all the time. And making sure that when things like George Floyd happen, you have a moment where you say, "Hey, I need to talk to you. This is this," and understand that. And that's the unfortunate thing. But I will also say something though about this generation, Gen Z. I think we give them too little credit. I think they're ready for it. I think they're ready for this more than we think they are. I've seen enough. I've mentored enough and talked to enough people who are talking back to their parents on this idea of racism, and they're much more fluent in the LGBTQIA conversations and to all these things. I don't know. I think.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that part. I just think, and I really love like the fearlessness that I'm seeing in this generation, right? Because like what Carla was saying before, like I feel like for me, even from a cultural aspect, like how you're saying you're Nigerian, my parents are from the Caribbean, right? So my parents are from Jamaica. That's my background. So there's that whole structure of like, almost like speak when you're spoken to, okay? Like you just follow the rules. Yeah. That's what you do, right? So I love the fact, like my daughter, for her sense, like in her friends, like they keep me on my toes in the fact, and I love learning from them because, and I think with the access of technology and all that other stuff, we're in a different time where this is why I really believe if this is going to change, it's going to be now. Because I feel like definitely from a humanity perspective, this is the generation to make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. I will just add a little piece around the conversation to kids. And I think I've been talking about my boys who have been incredible. It's their first it's their first sort of activist moment, right? They're 23, 20 and turning 17. And which is amazing to me that I say that out loud. But they are just, they're really just, to your point, Tovi, just like full of just stuff that they've had to put on hold or like hold down. I want to say it that way, like it's been held down. And this has really just really opened them up. But having lived, so, you know, I was married for 27 years to their dad, and we had many occasions where we were pulled over as a family, where they were in Toronto. And so what I've been sharing the most with my communities is that this is not a state's issue. This happens in Toronto, as multicultural as it is. You know, it happens equally. You know, we were pulled over all the time as a couple, and I was always, the police would come to my door and ask me if I was safe, if this man was, you know, hurting me, like craziness. I'm like, he's my husband, do you know? But then again, to that point where I was like also taught to not be rude or whatever, I would just be no sir or whatever. And that's ridiculous, right? That's a ridiculous answer to that question when it's your, you know, boyfriend or husband. But to your point about the boys, my kids we've had that conversation with, so my oldest is 23 since he was 12. And so they've all had that conversation. They're 3 years apart. So the first one had it when he was was 6. And there's this sort of set of rules about every time you go out of the house that happens every single, to this day. You know, I was sharing this that last week, that it's so automatic now. You know, my son was telling me he's going for a run. I ask him, you know, how long do you think you're going to run for? He tells me an answer. I ask him if he has his phone. He gives me the answer, yes. And then I say to him, because the parks had just opened, I say, if they come and tell you need to leave, you make sure you don't talk back. You don't ask questions. You just do exactly what they ask. And I'm like, and when I reflected on that, I'm like, you know, this was after like maybe a week ago. So it's so automatic as a mom to have that dialogue with my Black son. That's just, you know, that I think that every Black mom, until this is changed, until the system is changed, there is so much. I think we have to go back to Tayo's point right from the beginning. This is a systemic problem that we have to dismantle, right? It's not really about what I'm telling my kid or what someone else is telling their kids. We have to do this from an education place. We have to do this from the law. We have to do this, you know, judicially. We have to do this in every institution we have. We need to be making change.
Yeah. Yeah, and the tricky part, I think, you know, as I hear this, so I'm not a parent, I hear it a lot of time from my mom and dad. I remember during the protests, my mom and dad know I'm a very atypical Nigerian in the sense that I always talked back. You were talking about being in Jamaica. God. They were very used to the idea that I tend to react in an action-oriented way when I see injustice, even with the dictatorship initially grew up with. And so their biggest fear came from that place, Carla. Like, yeah, look, I know you're in diversity, equity, inclusion. I know you do this thing, but cops, they're kind of crazy. And I'm seeing all these things. And so I remember having to manage that expectation. And as I was reflecting, I was like, oh gosh, I can only imagine what it must be like for them being a continent away with COVID, and then being able to see us in the social media generation and see the things that I'm saying and all that. And so that emotion is not going to go away until years of proof that systems can go away. So if anyone is wondering, that's why I keep saying it's a lifelong journey. It's not, I don't even know if this is going to happen in our generation or not, but the idea of understanding the depths to the traumatic feelings that happens in many Black families is, you have to think of it from that point of view, is where, you know, you have to be cautiously optimistic. Okay, maybe if two years went by without this, I can have some hope. But all it takes is one incident for something to trigger something, and you're like, okay, I remember he's in this city, he's in that place. And so it's just this type of unlearning. And that's why it's very important to train and make sure our kids see color and understand the experiences that come with that color, because part of the experiences that come with that color is what you will go through, Carla, or what I would go through as an older brother. You're not just thinking about yourself. It's not about yourself. I end up acting like my mom to my younger brothers, and they're in the different states. And so it's just that collective over worrying about people that are adults.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Can I pipe in two things? One, Shelly has had her hand up for a long time. Shelly, do you want to go ahead, and then we'll back to you.
I'm having a great time listening to everybody's experiences right now, and like to preface this by my own experience. I am a mother of two biracial young men, and they are 24 and 26. And for me, it's been interesting watching them grow up, because they have a large extended Jamaican family on their father's side. So they have been exposed to their Black side right from birth, and actually have had less exposure to my family because my family lives farther away. Yeah, I as a mother raising these two children, I've had to become aware of the situations that they're going to encounter and situations that they've encountered. And I have found myself speaking for them because they've been taught to be quiet by their father. Their father has been in their life all along, but he, from the Jamaican point of view, you're polite, you're quiet, you don't, you try to blend in and you don't speak up, right? You mind your manners. And I've found myself being the one that's called people who've interacted with my children on their racism and their attitudes. I have to tell you, this is the first time that I feel like something is actually changing. I've watched so many young men, and I'm going to get emotional here, because every time a young man is shot or beaten or mistreated simply because of the hue of their skin, I feel for their mothers, I feel for their parents, I feel for their family, because I know that how much hurt they have. And I never ever want my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren to experience that kind of violence just because of their skin. It's ridiculous to me. It's everybody is beautiful in their own way, and yeah, and that's the way I was raised. I was raised to look and to I was always taught to treat people with dignity and respect, and to yes, acknowledge who they are, acknowledge how they look, but also to look beneath the surface to the person. So that's how I wanted to raise my children. And it was kind of thrown in my face, left, right, and center, that because they are viewed as young Black men, as young Black boys, that they are being judged as I've seen them being judged as more violent. I was told by one vice principal that my son, because he had done something inappropriate, which all young boys do, but I was told by one vice principal that, oh, he might end up in jail as an adult.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being vulnerable with what you're going through and experiencing. Yeah, it's a heavy conversation.
It is a heavy conversation, And I have to admit that sometimes I feel guilty for my lack of melanin. I'm like, here I am, this obviously very white privileged person, and what right do I have to be telling my story when there are so many other stories out there? But I think it's important for me to also share my story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If anything, you're speaking, and I think this is what Natalie's like, this is the whole reason at the end of the day we're talking about humanity, right? And I think when it comes down to it, you're a mother. You can't, that level of humanity, the being a mother in humanity, or just being parents, or being a sister, or being, it's all about our roles really in the human life cycle, right? You have every right, like, you made me so emotional, because I know that feeling. You understand what I'm saying? Because especially for, you know, my brothers, you know, my dad didn't even meet their mom's parents until after they pretty much split up after 20 plus years, because they refused to even acknowledge my dad existed, even though they acknowledged the grandchildren. But to them, my dad was non-existent, and their background is German, you know what I mean? So for them, but it was so weird that after they split up, that's when they wanted to be more part. There's a lot of other history behind that, but it was just so weird how that dynamic changed after the fact, right? So, you know, you have every right, Shelley, and the thing about it, the fact that you're here asking questions just says that, it just speaks volumes to your heart, and the fact that you really want to be part of the change, not only for your kids, but for everybody. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and to Toby's point, like, this was intended to really help humanity. Obviously, with racism being the conversation that's needed most at this time, because it's enough is enough, and it's not the only conversation that we need to have for a while. Because even when I hear some of these stories, part of me, and you know, this is I'll share with you, and then you tell me, like, I'd love to hear the feedback. Part of me is like, you know, I have 2 girls. I'm going to say the exact same things. When are you going out? 2 girls, because I'm fearful from them being 2 girls and just being a girl. You know, when are you going to be? And they're young now, so but that absolutely, that fear goes in my mind. So am I allowed to voice that? And I get, absolutely, I am allowed. Both are. The thing is, there's no mutual exclusivity here. It's like both are valid, and in the name of helping humanity be a just place for us to all live in.
Yeah, Natalie, I just want to add, though, just into that, because I have a daughter as well. I have 3, like, including and of course we have those conversations about safety with women. But the one thing we can say that's different than we can say to our Black boys is, if you see a police officer, they're a safe person for you.
Yes. And I totally got that when you were saying.
So systemically in the system, it's different, right? Systemically, that's really different. And I of course understand exactly what you're sharing, but I just think we just have to keep that really at the forefront, is that we want all of our kids to be safe 1,000%, but I'm actually protecting my kids from who's meant to protect them. That's my conversation.
And that's what's
the
crazy.
that I was talking about is police, security, whatever, like, because they will just assume, they will make assumptions that I can't control necessarily. I'm not talking about individual police officers. Systemically, there's an assumption that will be made that they're breaking the law, that they're doing it on purpose, that they're criminal, that they're thugs, that they're whatever, right? Even though they're straight. And it doesn't even matter if they're straight A students or not, but they are, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have money, it doesn't matter. So if you're male Black, it's a completely different.
Yeah, and I'm totally getting the reality of that.
Yeah.
I would never have to have that conversation with my
Yeah,
kid.
I wanted to just ask Haley, like, I don't know, like you're in the South, right? So how is in the States? Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, so it's been very, very intense here. Yeah, I'm just listening to you guys, taking it all in as I'm sitting here as well. But I have 5 kids too. We have a blended family, like 2 coming in from each side and 1 together. And we've just been having lots and lots of conversations, just opening up. I mean, my children are all white, but even noticing with them how uncomfortable they are to even talk about it, and to just like really be holding that space, like very often of just like, what do you think's going on? Like, cause they're picking up, things from the news, and then they go to other families, 2 of them we share, and they have different perspectives on things, and just really holding that space to go, what are you hearing? What are you processing? What do you think? How do you feel when this happens? Have you noticed this? And it's just been really powerful to allow them to have their voice. Cause I noticed that the fact that they were white, they felt like, even because our children range from, well, our youngest is 2, but I'm talking about the 9 to 14-year-olds. And just, one of my boys I just felt like he wasn't even able to talk. He was like, well, I don't feel like this is a conversation I'm supposed to have. And like, and you could tell he almost carried like a shame and a guilt of even having a voice at it too. And I'm like trying to open that up for them to say, no, this is part of it, is that, yes, you don't know what it feels like to be in the shoes of some of your friends and what's going on from that perspective. But this is the world, and in order to change everything, we need to be able to sit with the discomfort. So I think that's been really eye-opening for me, is just allowing the children to process it even from their point of view.
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to say is inevitably a lot of shame and guilt will occur, but I want to encourage people to use that as drivers, as motivators, as opposed to things that paralyze them or arrest them. Because that's what I've noticed. I think a lot of times when people feel that way, it's like, I can't do anything. What am I going to say? And I'm always saying, but you can use it as a way for you to say, I am not going to make sure I'm part of this. And so I just think there's that reframing. And once again, it goes back to how we are conditioned as a world where, I don't know, many cultures, I know in my culture, if you did something wrong, it was shame and a big deal and all that. But this isn't a shame where you should be embarrassed about who you are. It's about, okay, maybe I participated in this. This is what I'm going to do now. And also, this conversation is not about, this is the thing that that it always gets me, is the conflation of the narratives, where people feel like if you start talking more about the situation, with Black lives, it means that you're taken away from your identity or something. And I'm not saying anyone has done that here today, but a lot of people feel like, well, does that mean I can't say this anymore? I can't express my white side or any of that. And I'm like, but what, I don't know how that has nothing to do with you not being able to express your white side, because first of all, the white side has always been the standard. So I don't know what would be different. It's more about accepting more narratives, right? And it's not a crabs in a barrel thing. It's about, if you truly believe in that creative humanity, it's about, hey, we're going to invite more people to the table. We're going to learn. They have their side. You have your side. Let's have the conversation, as opposed to this fear-based thing. And I see that in how this gets politicized here, particularly in America. It becomes the left versus right narrative. And that to me has always been confusing. I'm just like, what does this have to do with what does this have to do with yourself not being able to be your all that? So I just think we need to have those subtle mindset shifts, because when humans react from a place of fear, it's almost like that's it, I'm taking my, and that's not even what we're saying. So
it's kind of like the scarcity. It's kind of the scarcity mindset, and someone can't, if someone else is winning, then I'm losing. Well, that's not the case. We can all actually win together, and we can actually lift each other up that way. And that's this conversation. Sorry, Haley, did you want to say something?
Oh, I was just going to add to that. Like, I really believe so strongly in using your emotional reactions as feedback. Like, there's a reason you're feeling shame. So like, even with my kids, I'll be like, well, let's look at that. Like, what does that mean? What are you carrying there? Like, let's unpack it, because they're not meant to just, it's easy to just dodge it and go, oh, well, that's not me, and I didn't do anything, so I'm going to put it over here. And it's like, no, let's dig into those feelings and let's use them and see what's underneath there, because that's how you grow, is there's always growth and growth and growth underneath every single emotion we're feeling.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, and it
Totally.
kind of goes to, oh, sorry, Carla, go ahead.
No, that you could go ahead. I was just going to add, like, I think we've all been in like this sort of like, we've all been like taking a lot in and listening and doing a lot of learning right now. And I've kind of been equating this movement around civil rights and around Black Lives Matter to a marathon. And so we've all been sort of like at the beginning of a marathon, everyone kind of like races out and you're trying to find your spot, so that, so you can find out where you're going to be in the race. And then, of course, now where we are, I feel, is in the pace part. So now we're going to do a really long time of pace and finding our pace and figuring out how we can be activist allies for a really extended period of time, not Twitter and Instagram, but actually what are we going to do to change our ways as humans to become much more aware of what needs to change, right? And so what are the like really specific things that we can be doing over a long period of time? Because we can't sustain what happened for the first 3 weeks after George Floyd's death for the rest of time. We will all burn out, or get really discouraged because people will stop or whatever. We really have to be on this much longer journey, which is why I love conversations like this, because it gives us opportunities for people to kind of ask those questions. What should I be doing? What can I be doing next? Here's what I am doing. Here's how I feel. And so just being able to, keep moving that, the steps forward, right? Things like, just changing something so simple, like changing your friend list in Facebook or Instagram to include Black writers, people who are running, who you have been influenced by, who are talking about Black Lives Matter, whatever. You just add in, instead of just always adding people who are the same, add new people in, and that's going to change what you see, right? Just on a daily basis, right? Or read something different, or watch a different show, and just keep adding, expanding, right? So that you're feeling like that's included in your life instead of it being excluded.
Yeah, beautifully put. Thank you so much, Carla. Listen, I want to just honor the time that we said that we're going to be here. I'm open to us being here longer if people would wish to continue to be here for maybe another 15 minutes or so, or 20 minutes. I do want to say, and I shared this earlier before, is we're actually creating a donation to a Black-run community here in Toronto, and it's called BBPA. I'll send everyone the details, and if you want to make a donation, you're welcome to. And of course, they help to fuel Black Lives thriving in businesses and professions. They have scholarships, they have mentorships. It's a beautiful organization. So I'll put that in the chat. And but I do want to honor those who just want to be here for the time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being open to the conversation and having the uncomfortable conversation. And thank you to our beautiful guests who came today. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm willing to stay another 15, 20 minutes. I have time. So if there's anybody else that wants to stay on, that wants to, we can continue to chat.
Yeah, I'm going to drop the link right now. And for those of you who, just give me 1 second. Theo, I know you said you had to go. What's your status?
Yeah, I have another event, but if it's 15, 20 minutes, I think I should be fine. But
you just like us so much, you're going to stay with us.
Yes.
That was the good answer. Okay, I dropped the link in the chat there, and I'll drop it in Facebook as well so people can see it. And yeah, sorry, I just wanted to interrupt that with our conversation just to honor the time, and please, let's continue the dialogue.
I just want to open up the floor. If there is anybody else that has any statements, questions, besides the panelists, We definitely want to make this as interactive as possible. Remember, this is a safe environment for you to ask questions, to speak. There's no judge and shame here, so please ask.
I kind of just wanted to touch upon what Haley was saying. I really, really appreciated what she said about the shame and the guilt that often comes with children being white. And even with my partner, we've dealt with that. And some people feel like it's not their responsibility to have to unpack their partner's emotions towards like Black Lives Matter and towards racism. But for me, him dealing with that shame was something that was really inhibiting our communication about this issue. And it was something we really needed to sit down and talk about, because it was like, with white privilege, I'm like, honey, I don't blame you for being white. Like, that's just dumb. Like, I don't blame you for being white. You cannot control how you're born. I will blame you, though, if you choose not to use your privilege to help lift up the voices of people that are being marginalized, not just me, but I'm like in all communities, people part of the LGBTQ plus community, like people with disabilities, all of that. So I really appreciated what she said, because I think it's important to me, people with compassion, and really help unpack those emotions of shame in order for that conversation to happen. Just because for me, I think that's more part of the long term of what we want to do here, and creating equality and creating equity and having justice, is to just create that conversation. So I just wanted to say that I really appreciated what Haley was saying there with her children.
Thank you.
Yeah. I thank you. Thank you so much. There's so much to talk about, honestly, that I had like 4 pages worth of topics to go through. We didn't even get through a couple of them. Stacy, you just mentioned you shared with friends, and they said that they're scared to say things because they're afraid they will say something wrong or use the wrong words. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Stacy, where are you?
Say something that's racist when they don't intend to. Are there any resources that address this? Stacy, did you want to unmute to elaborate on that, or you just want us to talk about what resources could possibly be available?
Sorry, I was having trouble finding my unmute.
No worries. Thank you for being here.
I have just heard this many times where people, my friends or other groups that I've been in have said, we're just afraid to say something that will be interpreted wrong when it's not the intention of that. And so I didn't know if there was any resources available. I know I heard a speaker several years ago that had said he was writing a book about something along the lines like, when you say this as a white person, this might be how it's heard from the perspective of a Black person. And I can't remember the speaker's name or even the name of the book, but I just didn't know if there was any kind of resources just to help people to understand that while what they're saying may not be coming from a place of intending it to sound racist, that it might, and how to educate themselves. Does that make sense at all?
For sure it does. I think there's tons of resources. I mean, I think there's just so many resources that are available right now, especially because even if you just go on Indigo and you just type in, Black Lives Matter, you're going to get like a ton of books. I know on Netflix, not Netflix, maybe on demand, I'm not sure. There's like lists of movies that you can watch right now, and I mean, it's such a rich time right now to find resources. So I would start, the public libraries will have resources that are listed. There's just I think the key is really just keep having conversations, even though they're uncomfortable. I've been hosting Daring Conversations for the last few weeks, and just my platform is mostly heartfelt white women. And so I appreciate so much having this opportunity to provide a safe space also to have start using words like white supremacy, using words like white privilege, saying anti-Black racism, saying racial bias, like just even saying those words that just feel like they don't even like come out of our throats because it feels wrong to talk about, because we've been taught that for so long. Don't talk about race. So it's really about having the uncomfortable conversations. I know for me, I am open to people asking specifically if this is okay, if this is not okay. And I have beautiful friends who have done that, both, you know, obviously white friends who have done that. And then just having conversations with with friends who are Black, who are like, we're having open, like really kind of figuring out how to meet people where they are and lean in and be really loving, because that's what I feel like is the key for all of us, is if we can lean in and meet each other where we are, we're going to actually be able to elevate this, right? But everybody has to be willing to do that work.
Yeah.
I think of internally and collectively. Like, I think it's a really big piece. And so, I know I'm not answering your specific question, Stacey, like what is the resource, but I do think that it's such an excellent, and maybe somebody else wants to answer that specifically, but I just think we're in such a rich time right now. Do you know, I think, you know, last week or 2 weeks ago, there was Share the Mic, and all of these incredibly high level white women who have platforms with lots and lots of people, had all of these people, they gave their mic over to Black women who are, you know, just are great activists, educators, you know, professors, all of these different things. And so you could even just go on your favorite, Julia Roberts, Ellen DeGeneres, you know, Gabby, like you were talking about at the top, and just find the square where that's there and start there. Do you know, there's just so many people who are providing information. I think it's so important for us to, just keep growing in that, right? And I'm doing the same thing right now. I'm reading a book by Desmond Cole, who's a Toronto activist and journalist, called In the Skin We're In. Is that right? In the Skin We're In, yeah. And also a book by Bell Hooks, which you know, so just finding things for all of us to just keep expanding in this conversation.
Yeah.
You know, sorry, if anyone wants to add resources, you can pop it in the chat, and I'll collect I'll collect them all. Sorry, Kyle, what do you want to say?
No, I mean, I just wanted to echo what Carla was saying. I agree with that, and I found a plug, because I was going to plug, hey, resource book called "Use Your Difference to Make a Difference." It's sorry, I'm very corny. I didn't, but. By the way, one thing that this is a hack. I always tell people to ask this question. So, because yes, don't be surprised if you hear a lot of people say Google is a resource, but this is something I want to tell you, Stacey. So if you find a book that you read from someone, what I normally do is I'll go to the footnotes, right? And the footnotes usually have people that they're citing, and based on that, you can see that person's influence, and then you read that book as well, and all the list of books that go on there, and back and forth. So if you're looking to create a curated list, because you know, Carla's right. Ever since this happened, there's been top books by this. Another book is Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad. Wonderful. I love Layla. But as far as other resources, I think on anyone's Instagram, there's been like a bunch of, in any of our Instagrams, if you go to Carla's Instagram or my Instagram, there'll be a bunch of different things there. But just thinking about things like that would help. But yeah, I put the plug away, so sorry.
Is that your book?
Thank you.
Can you make sure, can you hold it up? I have not seen it.
It's called Use Your Difference to Make a Difference.
Beautiful. Thanks, Ty.
Thank you.
I think that might be part of the problem, is there's so many resources that it's a little bit overwhelming when you're going, where do you start? What's the best one?
Gotcha.
You know,
I don't know
like
if there's
the
a best
title of
one.
your book though, so I might start there.
Yeah.
Thank you for your plug.
Your plug worked. Your plug worked.
I'm gonna go check that out.
And Stacey, I just want to say that there might not just be one resource, so just start with one, right?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't resonate, put it down and get a different one. Like, I really just think, you know, that's kind of like how we all just treat it as if you were just learning, right? Like,
I don't know if you've heard of it's a video, and I don't know what you all think of it or if you've heard of it, but it's Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man.
Yes, it's
Yeah, Emmanuel
wonderful.
Acho,
Yeah.
fellow Nigerian,
Yes.
by the way. Fellow
Yeah, yeah.
Nigerian American.
Well,
Those are
I
great.
found them. I found them. I liked them. You know, they were short, easy. I thought he addressed, you know, when I was asking about when people are afraid to say certain things. Like he started off by saying, my white friends are asking me, do I say Black or African American? And I mean, that's a very simplistic question, but I think that that's kind of what I was alluding to, that it's so simple, but yet white people are so scared of using the wrong term and offending someone. And so he addressed that like right off on his first video, but I hope he continues the series. I don't know how you all feel about it, but
no, he will. He will.
that
He
was
will.
good.
And I've saw Natalie's seen that. Is just I started the hashtag Let's Talk Bias at the beginning of the month. It's the same sort of conversations, but the point you raise is these things are simple but not easy. So a lot of these things are really just simple conversations to many people, but they aren't really easy to implement in many people's lives because it really involves a lot of unlearning and basically reshaping your worldview many times. So that's the hard part. But yeah.
If I can just say, like, one of the things that I've come to realize is as long as your question or your words are coming from a place of love and compassion, if it lands on the other person in a way that offends them, then hopefully you guys can have an open communication to say, you know what, that didn't work for me. And you can then learn from that and say, oh, okay. And you know what, it might, like, if I have a conversation with Carla about angry Black woman, it might land a certain way. And then with Toby, it might land a different way. So it's all about being in conversation and communication with that person. And again, coming from a place of love and compassion.
Yep. Yeah, in our family, as I had mentioned, we have all different, we have a variety of different race. Well, we have white and Black in our family, not a variety. And we're sitting down and having conversations as a family. So I think that's also really important is, you know, I love Sasha, did I say it right that time? Yeah, wrote in the chat, you know, talk to people who feel safe to you, or, you know, I think that's such a great thing. You know, so many friends of mine are reaching out and saying, can I have a conversation with you? Yeah, like that feels like so much better than all of the silence that's been around for such a long time. And, you know, and if we can both come to that with really openly, that's really, it's lovely. I feel like, you know, I've been in this for a really long time. So, you know, it's nice. It feels really different for me this time, you know, in 50 years for it to feel suddenly like, you know, my kids are so inspired. They're making huge differences. You know, their friends are making differences. And sure, there's still people who are still questioning whether or not Black Lives Matter. That seems ridiculous to me, but I get that there are still people questioning that. And I just think we have to really just kind of keep kind of pushing forward so that becomes like a non-issue, right? We have to keep raising it and raising it and raising it and raising it so that those people who can't see that there needs to be change become obsolete and insignificant. You know, and everyone else is like, yeah, we're all on the same page, let's go. And we have to do that together, right?
Right.
Yeah. Haley, thank you for listing the resource.
Yeah, hopefully it can be accessed, and if not, I can figure out another way. But it's a pretty good list that was shared with me that has just different things compiled in there that might be helpful.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I was able to open it, so yeah, I'll probably log it up turn it into a PDF and attach it to the event so people want to access it that way. Since you did the little plug for yourself, Tayo, Heather's asking that if you're going to be offering signed copies so she can, you know, tell her nephew that she knows the author.
Yeah, I'm always happy to sign copies. Just hit me up. I will send it.
Okay, perfect. I'll get you two connected because I know her personally, so we'll work on that.
Me? You want my signature? What?
Listen,
You're proof that the plug works.
you're proved.
Yeah.
No,
So,
I've been watching you now, Tayo, for a little bit now, and I really appreciate your candid, like you being candid with what your conversations, and simple and just like very like, just this is what it is. This is what it is. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's open up the dialogue.
Thank you.
yeah.
Beautiful.
So as we're talking about earlier language, there's been something that has always, it sits with me and I'm not too sure, and I would like to get your guys' feelings on it, because especially to, having the opportunity to have people that are from, the other part of North America. But for me, before they actually started having the boxes, like, check what you are. And it's very weird though, when you talk about us as a collective, I still find people, and this is not just for Black people, but the word visible minority. I cannot tell you how that word just stirs something so ugly inside of me. The word minority, and this is what I'm saying about the language, right? Of like, because it automatically just sets you up to feel less than.
That's a great point.
Interesting.
Right? So, and then it goes back to the conversation when people say that, maybe Black people were just overreacting and, you guys do have rights and everything's equal, but you're calling me a visible minority. So what, like, come on, like, let's be real and let's talk truth. So I just want to know how that term makes people feel. Is it just me that word is just, it makes you feel less than? Because it makes me feel less than, but at the same time too, I find myself using it because I don't know another word to use in order to talk about other people of races as a collective, because this is the word that we have been using.
That's a great point.
Heather, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so I think that the words bother me because you have to think about what a visible minority is at that point. Like, I'm a visible minority because I'm overweight, but that doesn't come into play at any of these questions. So for me, it's like, okay, well, what defines a visible minority? Is it someone who lacks one arm? Is it someone who is, handicapped in a different way? Is it someone who is, whose body type is different? No, it always comes back to race. And that to me is not, something that we should be turning around and saying like, oh, you're a visible minority. Well, how is that? I very rarely saw people of color until I started going to school. And then when I did start going to school, because I was going in Northeast Calgary, the alternate race was of an East Indian descent. So, at that point, I still wasn't seeing a lot of Asian people, a lot of Black people. It was mostly white people and East Indian people. And then from there, at that point, I was, a lot of the time in the classes, I was the visible minority because of just the way that the neighborhoods were. So at that point, then do I say, yes, I'm a visible minority because my area is full of that? Like, how do I define what visibility is? Like, I see everyone. So I don't think that, any of the different groups to me would be visually less than. And I think, so that's why it bothers me so much, is that I have to then think, well, what is the visible minority? And then it's like, it bothers me because then it's like, well, why didn't you just say what color are you, or what race, like, what, whatever, like, if you're going to be insensitive about it, like, let's get right down to brass tacks about it. Like, you want to turn around and say, like, are you Caucasian? Fine, but like, let's not make it a point where we've got to think about all of the different ways that someone could be, a minority visibly when. That's all.
Do you want to share on the panel with that or comment on the panel?
why is it even there to begin with? Like, why do we even have to check boxes? Like, I guess maybe you guys can inform me on this. Like, why even have that at all?
Well, usually in our instance, like for us, we have certain laws out here, especially when it comes to like privacy and protection. But you will have, so they can't usually ask certain things in employment related situations, but in some situations, people will ask that questions, especially, for example, we do our census every year. I don't know if you guys have that in the United States, but I'm sure you do, right? And usually they like for you to identify there. And usually it's like, I feel like people know they shouldn't be asking it in some certain circumstances, but they still ask it anyway, right? And for example, I feel like it's not necessarily a negative thing in the fact, like we're talking earlier. Like, I don't mind checking a box that says, you know what, like black, white, whatever. You're calling it what it is. But when the visible minority thing is like how Heather's saying is that, in my mind, what are we talking about? So for example, we're talking about somebody that is disabled, right? But they've now come up for a politically correct word, right? Because, you know, they used to use, like, if people, they used to use the R word, which I'm not going to say. You understand what I'm saying? So now we've come up for a politically correct word for that group of people. But for this, there's never been a change in that language. And I'm trying to see, you know, like Xanthi was saying in the group, you know, how about marginalized community, right? And then it goes back to me thinking what Heather's saying, what do we consider marginalized, right? You know, so it's just like for me, because you know, and me and Allie talked about this a couple of weeks ago, it's like, I don't know everything either. Just because I'm Black and I'm, you know, in the struggle, whatever the case may be, I don't know everything either. I am still learning, right? So for me, I need to change my language as well. And, you know, that word bothers me, but I don't know what else to use. Like, I just want it to be a loving, compassionate word that's inclusive, that makes me feel good about the fact that I am a Black woman. And, you know, even though those things don't define who I am, I don't like how Haley's saying necessarily checking those boxes. I'm like, but what does that really have to do with anything, you know? But in a case like, for example, this whole thing of COVID, especially in the United States, where let's keep it 110% real, a lot of more Black people have been dying from it. Yeah, maybe I want to do check a box because I want somebody to look into these things, because as we're talking about systemic stuff, right? This is not even way before COVID. Let's talk about AIDS. Let's talk about the drug epidemic. We need to start asking these questions and start identifying these things. So yeah, I will check a box off for Black for that, because people need to start realizing the fact that there's certain groups that are being impacted more deeply due to the color of their skin. Yeah. But does it not mean that I'm less than, right? That's what I'm trying to say, because I think to myself, when, you know, if I have grandchildren or whatever, just I have a few godchildren, you know, just saying the word minority is just like, I feel like it's them saying, why am I not special? You know, why is somebody better than me? You know, it's just like, you know, and I don't want to get emotional, but that was like the most thing that bothered me, when my daughter would come home to me and say, why is my hair not like my friend's hair? Why is it not straight? Like, that makes her ugly. It makes her, you know, less than. So I know the solution might not be in this room and it might not be right now, but I just need to figure out if I'm the only one that feels this way about that word minority. Whether it be you're overweight but it's never about the physical thing with minority. They're talking about the color of somebody's skin.
And that's exactly why I think that it needs to be, you know, it needs to come down to, you know, let's not, like, it needs to not be a minority thing. We're asking this question for a demographic reason, you know, whether it be for healthcare, for government. Like, I know for sure in Canada, the Indigenous people are often segregated out to having a whole different questionnaire because of reparations and things like that. So it's harder to get benefits and things like that through that channel. So I mean, for us to turn around and to pretend like minority is not a bad word as far as demographics, that's wrong. Like, you know, make it a box, make it say, okay, this is your census, and are you Asian, white, black, you know, East Indian, whatever. And then it has to come down to us to change that language going forward, where it's not visible minority, it's what, like, it's who are you, it's not what are you.
And Tovi, words matter so much. And I think it's so powerful that you brought up this very specific example, because it allows everyone on this call to question it every single time they see it, hear it, say it ever again, right? And that's the power of these kinds of conversations, is that we have the opportunity to change this one person at a time, 25 people at a time. And then every time you now hear it on the, like all of the people who are on this call, have this really deeply impactful moment where Tovi's sharing with us all how much it hurts. That's at a cost that she's sharing with us. It's such a privilege for all of us to feel that minority feels like garbage to people of color. And so we're gonna change it, right? And so let's stop using it. When you see it, call it out. When you say it, retract it and say, I don't mean that. I mean Black, Indigenous, people of color, or whatever it is you specifically mean, South Asian, Black, whatever, right? So we all have, words matter so much, and they change the way we feel about ourselves. They change the way we interact with other people. And so you've given us this incredible, just personal moment where we can all now change the rewire, right? Let's all rewire just for this quick, in this moment, and change saying visible minority and something else. And yes, it's going to be on forums. And then that's our job, to write to that, whatever that forum, whatever, wherever you see it, you write to that those people and say, I don't like this. This is not the way that I feel represented. I feel represented, or that is not a way that feels representative of people that I know. So let's discard that, right? And that's how we make change. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I don't know if everybody saw the message, but I said that I was going to wrap up in 2 minutes because we went way over the 15-20 minutes. This has been such good conversation, and I appreciate you guys all being here. Asesha, what you have to say, is it brief?
Hey, Mom, I'll keep it.
Okay.
Such a
conversation a few times just about her expressing how she doesn't like the word visible minority. And personally, for me, I don't necessarily hate the word, especially coming from academia. Like, visible minority for us was a really important word because it really signified the power aspect of racism and how Black people lack power. And I know a lot of people feel like, well, Black people aren't powerless. We don't feel powerless, but it's like within the system, we're powerless. And I feel like that's just a reality within academia that we've had to constantly express, is it's like, even though Black people do feel empowered some ways, overall, we're very powerless to this system and how this system impacts us. So that's why I don't necessarily hate the word. I just hate the operaization of the word, the way in which it's defined, which I think that, sorry, what's your name? Heather did a really good job talking about as well, in terms of being like obese and like that being a visible minority as well. So that's just my little 2 cents. That was quick, Mom.
All right. Thank you. So Natalie, I don't know if you want to close out, and I just want to say thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tayo, Carla, Haley. Like, my heart is full and it's happy right now. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I think you just did it. So thank you. Thank you again, everybody, for being here. We might do another one, so stay tuned. And it would be lovely to have this conversation because, you know, as we discussed, in order for us to continue to create this movement and have it be a sustainable part of humanity, conversation needs to continue to happen. So stay tuned for that. And thank you again for joining us.
Bye, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye.